It's really good to be here with each of you. Back again. Good. In the worship today, it was very much kind of like I love it when there's congruence of the things I'm thinking about, the way I prepared for today, and then the song selection, and then even the questions afterwards were really great. By the way, what I love about this size of a group is that we can open it up so that it can be more of a dialogue. So if you have a question, or if I say something that you go, what did you mean by that? I'm kind of a pretty high level intuitor. For those of you that know if you're an intuitor or not, or feel like you have a lot of intuition, I've discovered the blind spot in my life as an intuitor, and that is I make assumptions. I assume that if I know it or sense it in some way, well, of course everybody does. That's not true at all. By the way, 25% of the population are intuitive, and the other 75% are sensors. If you know anything about the Myers-Briggs temperament inventory, so I make lots of assumptions. I'd rather not do that. I'd rather you say, "Stop! What does that mean?" Or yeah, that would be really helpful, because chances are other people are thinking the same way. When David asked me several months ago to choose a psalm, I very quickly chose Psalm 63. I didn't know how many people or what psalms he was going to grab, so I got back to him really quick. Nobody better take Psalm 63. I didn't say that, but I was thinking that. And I decided to call this our talk today, "The Longing of the Heart." I want to begin with a quick story. Way back in the day, I was one of the pastors of young adults at a very large church up the street, and we had a worship leader. His name is Bradley Kirk, and I got to know him back in those days. And then eventually he met a gal, and they invited me to officiate their wedding. And I think it was last year sometime, they said, "Hey, would you come in? We're going to renew our vows." And I think it's been 20 or 25 years back then. So anyways, we're talking about a long time ago. Bradley and a team would come up, and he would say this every now and then. And I'll go ahead and put it up here. He would say, at the beginning of the worship set, he would say, "You gotta eat, you gotta sleep, you gotta ski." He was a skier. Did you get that? You gotta ski, you gotta worship. And I never forgot. But one, because it was always laughed when he says you gotta ski. But he was planting seeds in me regularly when he would say this, that we've got to worship. And as we're going to dive into Psalm 63 in a few minutes, but I want to set up this idea of worship, because in Psalm 63 we're actually unpacking kind of where David, King David, he's anointed to be king in Psalm 63. He's already anointed, but he's not been brought into the role yet. In fact, Saul, the current king, has decided, "You're going to die, David." He was very jealous of David. King Saul is a wonderful case study on what happens when we are insecure and fearful, and if those things are not addressed. And he was very threatened by David, so he put David on notice, "You're going to die." And so David had to leave to try to save his life. And Psalm 63 is David's reflections as he's running for his life, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But think about this for a second. It was really cool. I really loved the group I was with Danny and with Griffin, and I think even that felt very providential in just what we were sharing about what does it look like to connect to God. And if you would maybe relate to this, that there is, for me, continuously, it's not a make a decision and it's a done deal kind of a thing, but it's an ongoing challenge. Sometimes it's an ongoing struggle. Because I know that the longing of my heart is to connect with God, and yet it doesn't happen like this because I want it, because I say it's a priority. And so we're actually, as we look at this passage, as we look at this topic of worship, I think we're also looking at the human condition and a little bit about, and just some of you might relate to this idea of it's not a slam dunk. That desire, it is not a slam dunk. I wanted to note that the longings of every human heart is the innate need and desire to worship. That if you have that sense already, where did that come from? And by innate, we're describing that which is inborn rather than learned or acquired, and is deeply rooted in the essential nature of a person. That we are born with a desire to worship. The song God of Wonders, right? Because I spent a little bit of time later in the week. The outline's basically done. I think I'd already sent the slides to David, and the Lord said, I was just kind of thinking about this. I'm going, I think I missed something important. I missed Isaiah chapter 6, and actually it was one of the other songs that we sang that actually references Isaiah chapter 6, where it says, "I'm ruined." Remember that lyric, seeing God and then being ruined. That's from Isaiah chapter 6, where Isaiah is having this vision. And it sounds like this vision is like he's actually brought into the throne room of God, and begins to describe what that's like. And as these witnesses, as he's right as a front row seat into the glory of God. By the way, there's this picture is the throne room, and he says that there are these seraphim that are circling the throne of God. Are you familiar with this story? This might be something to look at afterwards or to review sometime. But the word seraphim, it's a very particular type of angel. There's different types of angels, apparently. But seraphim is the Hebrew word for burning ones. These angels are on fire. They're the burning ones. And if we could do this, there's kind of a fun word study and theme study in the scriptures is to follow where deity is often used to tell us that about this glory of God, that to be in proximity of God is to be on fire because the glory is so great. And so here are these seraphim, the burning ones, and they're circling the throne of God. And they're saying, "Holy, holy, holy." They keep on saying this word. And it's occurred to me that the angels, as they circle the throne room of God and they're looking at God, that they're continually saying this, they're making this declaration that God is holy, not because they stutter, but because as they look at God, they're seeing something new all the time. Every moment viewing God is a new discovery of who He is. And they can't seem to stop declaring that what they're seeing is like this, what makes God transcendent, beyond our ability to fully comprehend. To be in proximity of God, just real quick. To remember in the New Testament, after Jesus' resurrection, He's starting to appear to disciples. And He appears to two, and this is often called the story of the road to Emmaus, where Jesus comes and starts walking with these disciples. They don't recognize Him. After He leaves them, and they recognize this was the Lord that was with us, and they make this declaration, "Didn't our hearts burn within us?" as he walked with us along the way. So this theme of burning, this theme of experiencing the glory of God is to experience that sensation in some way. Okay. Present in the longings of every human heart is the innate need and desire to worship. Blaise Pascal said this. He said, "This infinite abyss can be filled only with an infinite and immutable object. In other words, by God Himself." Simply said, one person said, "The God-shaped void in our hearts can only be filled by God Himself." Blaise Pascal actually probably is the original person that said that. Here's the key. And I'm going to show you the next slide. We're going to call the golden calf syndrome. So we'll start from the beginning. Created to worship. This innate need and desire to worship. But if we don't worship God, we will worship something. If we don't worship God, we will worship something. The golden calf syndrome occurs when one chooses other than God to worship, and inevitably, they will choose something else to worship. This is a remarkable story. If you want to go to Exodus 32 sometime, God appears to the people, sort of, up on top of Mount Sinai. And again, this theme of fire. The mountain is on fire. There's thunder, there's lightning, there's smoke. The mountain is on fire because the presence of God is there. And the people are terrified. People are terrified. Maybe they make a mistake in their understandable fear and terror of the glory of God, because it's so overwhelming. They might have made a mistake because they say to Moses, "We don't want to be so close to God. You go and represent us." And I just wonder if that was a mistake. But anyways, they made it. They said it. And so the Lord invites Moses to come up because now God wants to provide for them kind of some guidelines for living. We call them the 10 Commandments. And so Moses goes to hang out with God. And I'm not sure how long he's gone, but he's gone for a while. And the people who recognize that God is on this mountain start to get forgetful. By the way, talking about the human condition. For me this week, as I was sharing with Danny and Griffin, I still am forgetful. These people were forgetful. They recognize that God is on the mountain. They say, "Moses, you got to interface with us. We can't get too close. We're terrified of God." But they become, for some reason, short memory. Because Moses is not there, they begin to fashion this golden calf. And instead of worshiping God, he's right there on the mountain, they worship a calf. Throughout history, the Bible tells us stories of how people repeatedly create objects of worship rather than worshiping God Himself, which the Bible calls idolatry. Romans chapter 1 is the Apostle Paul, the New Testament, is telling us, kind of giving us a bit of a commentary on history up to that point, but what applies for today. It says, they exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshipped and created and served and created things rather than the Creator. Okay, back to the song that we sing, God of Wonders. That song, I'm pretty sure, is based on Psalm 19. The first line of Psalm 19 says The heavens declare the glory of God. That statement there is what a lot of theologians call this, the way God reveals himself, they call it general revelation. So it's kind of, the idea of general revelation is this. So I'm going to take off my watch. Has anybody ever heard of Original Grain as a brand name? That's the name of this watch. I never heard of it before. Last year, for Father's Day, this showed up as a gift to me from my oldest son and his wife. They live in Georgia. I haven't seen them for a couple of years, almost 2 years. But it's a really cool watch, and I love it. I wear it pretty much every day. Okay. I would pass it around the room right now, but, maybe I wouldn't get it back, so maybe I won't. Take my word for it, it's a really good watch. And I'm thinking, it feels so. I don't know if you guys would do this. I said, I've never heard of this watch. I might want to buy another one. So I looked it up. I went to their website and I went, oh my gosh, my son and his wife spent way too much money. Good for them. No. I feel so loved by them. So, this is what Romans 1 is describing. The point of the story about the watch is, wow, this watch is really cool. It either implies somebody, there's a designer. There's a designer that works at Original Grain. There's a designer that came up with a design, and then there were some people in some factory someplace, maybe assembled overseas, I don't know. But somebody had envisioned a design for a watch and created a watch. And so let's find out who the creator of original design watches are. Let's get to know this person because I admire their handiwork so much. Or, that's one choice, right? Get to know the person who made the watch. Or, heck, this is amazing. I think I'm going to worship you, watch. Original Grain, you have my undivided loyalty. In fact, I love you, Original Grain. Watch. I'm going to live for you. I know. It's silly. By the way, it works also if you, I don't own one, but if I had a Rolex, I would have, because it works better with Rolex. The people look. So this is basically what Psalm 19 is helping us understand. In general revelation, God is saying, see all of this? Here's what I want you to conclude. There's a creator of all that exists. Here I am. And the people said, let's worship the creation. In fact, let's create ourselves and then worship what we ourselves can create. Rather than to worship the transcendent God, we'll create stuff. By the way, we're made in the image of God, so we do have creative ability. It's part of the Imago Dei. That's part of you and I being made in the image of God. So by the way, that little principle in there is true for us today. We can go back and go, what? How is it possible? As we read Romans chapter 1, these verses, the whole chapter, how silly, how totally silly it is for these people to conclude that they could create things and worship them instead of worshiping the Creator himself. But I wonder if it's possible. And when I'm honest with myself, I wonder if I don't express that same kind of propensity. All right, just plant the seed. Just a thought. The issue, as the Apostle Paul is talking in Romans 1, the issue is not whether we worship, but what we worship. And I think this is every person's battle, at least to some degree. What is worship from a biblical perspective? It is whatever occupies the space of ultimate trust, value, and identity, and devotion in a person's life. Whatever that is becomes their functional God. for you and for me. God, little g. Again, where I put my trust, my value, my identity, my devotion becomes my functional God. Okay, now we go to Psalm 63. Because now we're going to, I think it was Griffin that said this is your favorite psalm. Yeah, see, it's such an important one to me. That's why I said I got to tell David I want Psalm 63 so bad. So here's Psalm 63. It's not all of it, but this is the first half. David makes this declaration: "You are my God." What is he saying there? You are what I value the most. You are deserving of my devotion. I'm going to put my trust in you. My identity comes from you. You are my God. Earnestly, I seek you. I'm pursuing you all the time. I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you in a dry and parched land where there is no water. Some translations translate that Hebrew word weary land, in a dry and weary land where there is no water. Now, you probably have heard this before from Pastor David, but context is really important. On many Bibles, they'll give a little description, especially in the Psalms, who wrote it and what's the context, what are the circumstances. So I'm going to show you a couple of slides, okay? This is where David was at when he wrote these words. He was in the desert of Judah. Remember, he's running away from King Saul, who wants to kill him. And by the way, David had some friends, very loyal friends, that were warriors like he was, and they could see that King Saul was not the guy they wanted to make their leader. They could see that David was a better leader, that probably David, he wasn't a perfect person at all. Oh, by the way, do you have to be a perfect person to be a worshiper of God? The more you know about David, the more you realize the answer is absolutely not. That's so important to know. That's so important for us to know. I was having a conversation with somebody just a couple of days ago, and I was talking about the work that I've been doing the last couple of years of understanding the role of shame in my own life. By the way, if you haven't done a deep dive on what shame is, I highly recommend this at some point. But more importantly, I think we start with what is it, but it's taken me so many years of my life so that within the last few years, I'm identified, oh my gosh, I carry shame in my life. As I look back over my last 100 years of living, I'm about 100, by the way. As I look back over my last 100 years, I go, of course I see where that shame came from. But for so many of these years, it's like, how was I not recognizing it? And by the way, the reason why it's important to know where it exists is because it will animate some of our behavior. And the more ignorant we are of it, the more powerful it could actually be. But we can begin to work with that shame and make sure that it is not what animates our behavior once we know where it comes from. Probably everyone, or at least most people, carry some sort of shame. But it's almost better to discover it for yourself rather have somebody tell you that, right? But some of you are probably pretty much know that already. Some of you maybe like me, or maybe it'll come later. Anyways, here's the thing about shame. A more recent discovery for myself is my shame renders me neutralized. When shame raises its ugly head in my life, if I don't catch it, if I don't recognize it, I'm neutralized from being effective in so many relationships, and certainly in my relationship with God. The beauty is, in this passage, recognizing what David says about his longing for God. David was so imperfect. He had so much guilt and sin in his life. It's there in the scriptures. And yet God chooses to say, David, you're a man who's after my own heart. You're in pursuit of me, and you're not disqualified. You're not neutralized because you're not perfect. In fact, David, he was a mess. David was a mess. Probably sexual addiction. Certainly, we know he murdered. He had all kinds of issues. And you know what that says to me is, Ed, you don't have to be perfect to pursue God and to be a worshiper of God. Let's go back to I have one more photo. Okay, I don't know about you, but I have never contacted a travel agent and said, get me to this place. I got to go see it. I've never done that. That is, for me, this desert doesn't appeal to me as a place to hang out. Probably, though, look at the cliffs. In fact, if you know a little bit about David running from Saul, he hid in cliffs, he hid in caves. But let's go back to Psalm 63. Notice in verse 2, it says, I have seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and your glory. And because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. I will praise you as long as I live, and in your name I will lift my hands. Okay, here's kind of let's call it a principle. Let's notice this, that as David writes these words, he was in a place of great pain and desolation. And when I recognize that David could write these words in pain and desolation, it actually makes me say, Lord, if that's what it takes for me, then yes, I'll go to a desert place. If I need to be in a place of desolation to find you, to discover you, to turn my attention to you, then okay. It's a very sober statement to make, by the way. But you know what it does too? For me, I'll ask the question, when have I felt like God has rescued me? When have I felt like I just knew that I knew that God is real and that I wanted to declare that He is my God? When did I know that? And almost every single time, or maybe without exception, it was a place of pain of some sort, a place of desolation, some kind of a desert. I'll be really brief on this. There's stories behind each of these, but I have 3 sons. My first one, he's almost 47. My second one is 36. The youngest is 31. Each one of them has been given to me and to my wife twice. Jeremy, the oldest, had an aortic aneurysm. A physician friend of mine, the ER doc at St. Jude's, when he came to see me the day after Jeremy survived his aortic aneurysm, said, when I said to Steve Lynn, I said, Steve, yeah, he came and he says, they're talking about Jeremy all over the hospital. And I said, yeah, the surgeon said there was a 50-50 chance he wouldn't make it out of surgery. He said, oh, no. Ed, 1 in a million to 1 in 10 million survived what Jeremy has survived. My second son, Timothy, 9 years old, diagnosed with a brain tumor called medulloblastoma. It's a cancerous tumor. My third son went into one of the darkest places ever. We could have lost him too. You see, the Lord gave me back my sons a second time, each one of them. Talking about a place of desolation and a place where I knew God was real and that He was close, and where I knew I had no place else to turn. I think this is a bit of what we get when we read Psalm 63, and we get a little insight into what's going on in David's life. Desert place, so much pain, rejection. And by the way, he had already been anointed to be the next king. The promise of God and apparent death around the corner. And how do you put these, where's the congruence between these two things? And maybe in your own life, you have a sense of, I think God has promised me this, but the circumstances are the opposite. It doesn't figure. This is more confusing. I thought it was going to be this, but it's this instead. That was David. For me, that's what makes these words come to life. It makes these words come to life for me. I'm going to give you, if I may, just two, going to be pretty quick here, two longing of the heart principles. Here's the first one. First one is this: meeting God in our desolation is possible as we recognize that our spiritual dryness and emotional pain are not abandonment, but rather a sacred space in which we are invited into deeper intimacy with God and the opportunity to know God in His unchanging presence. By the way, let me just say, what if that desolation, a place of desolation, is of my own making? Not circumstances beyond my control, but I messed up. I created this place of desolation. And guess what? It's the same thing. Whoever's responsible for how I got here, myself included, that's my place where I can meet God. Especially as I've addressed the shame in my life. Because you see, I don't have to be neutralized, and I don't have to, because when I have shame, I hide. I hide from God, like if I could, but somehow it seems like makes sense in the moment, but it makes no sense at all. Because David also wrote this in one of the other Psalms: doesn't matter where I go, I can't escape your presence. That's great. But I still try sometimes. In desolation and emotional pain, and in the recognition of my own brokenness, there is a sacred place and an invitation into deeper intimacy with God, where I'm welcomed and accepted, where I can know Him and know that I'm known by Him. So that's the first one. Desolation and desert is a good place to meet God. Here's the second principle. Knowledge of God is experiential relationship, not merely an intellectual exercise. and not our religious practices. And so I put in the parentheses there, there's a little Hebrew word there. I'm not a language expert. I took language in seminary. I forgot everything that I learned, like most of us do. Maybe not Pastor David, but I have pretty much forgotten. But this word's a keeper. This is a really important word. That the knowledge of God is not intellectual knowledge. Knowledge of God is always, always, always experiential. And here's kind of a challenge for those of us like myself that are born in the West. Is that for those of us in the West, we've been influenced by the Greeks long ago, who taught us that it's all happens in the mind. But that's not the Hebrew worldview. The Hebrew worldview, and 2/3 of the Bible are written from a Hebrew worldview. Knowledge of God is experiential, not just intellectual. Hosea 6, actually the whole book of Hosea, is the prophet saying to the people on behalf of God, God has invited you to know him, and you've done all this religious behavior, but God doesn't know you and you don't know him. So notice he says, let us acknowledge the Lord. Let us press on to acknowledge him. For I desire mercy, not sacrifice, an acknowledgement of God rather than burnt offerings. That word acknowledgement is that word yada. By the way, as David is in the desert, running from Saul with by the way, his friends are, eventually they're calling them the mighty men. But it's pretty cool. David and his friends, as they're running from Saul, by the way, they ran from Saul rather than battle Saul, because they could have also stood up and fought. But as he runs from Saul, he had a choice. And by the way, one of the things I admire about David, even though his life is a messy story, is that he made some pretty courageous choices. And one of the choices that he made is not to assume the role of a victim. He could have played the victim role, and objectively he was the victim, but he chose not to. Instead, he lived as an empowered person, making the necessary choices and decisions to cultivate and worship God and to be in a relationship with him. The word empowered came up, I think it was during the liturgy portion, I heard it, which, again, a moment of congruence, because my word for the year, I have a word for the year. This is an idea for you if you want to. I like to start in about November, December, saying, Lord, can I have a word for the new year? My favorite word of all time is this word for this year. And I've had some pretty cool words, but this one continually, it probably is going to give you a little sense of who I am, even in this idea of battling shame and also battling the victim role. My word for the year is empowered. And almost every week I'm looking at, how do I unpack, what does that mean to me as I live life and as I cultivate my relationship with God and as I live with my imperfect wife as she lives with her imperfect husband. What does it mean to live empowered? And I think David chose, even though he avoided death and he avoided war with Saul, he doesn't play the victim role. He chooses to live empowered. Okay, we're about to wrap up. So I'm going to wrap up with a question. A question requiring, should say, courage. Requiring courageous honesty. That's it. And the question is, what do I rely on most for my security, significance, and worth? What do I rely on? Because that goes back to how we described worship, right? The answer to the question reveals what is functioning as our object of worship. It goes back to the quote from Blaise Pascal. Realizing that I live in an infinite abyss is essential, because only then do I seek to fill it with an infinite and immutable object, which is God Himself. And that's a courageous choice, by the way. I got to share with the guys over here a few minutes ago. And I didn't use this word, I don't think, but the word I'm using is I'm looking at the distractions available to me. And, I think it's on Sundays. Without me asking, I get a report of how many hours I spend on this every week. And I went, how is that possible? But clearly it is. I go, okay, that's a distraction. And Netflix is a distraction. And Prime is a distraction. And I have a list. And I love the practical question for our groups, because I think I'm starting. I'm launching this week, as I shared with the men I was with, what I'm calling the Great Experience. A lot of it is just preparation for this message, and diving into Psalm 63, and that is, I don't feel like I live in a desert because I have so many distractions to keep me busy. So what can I do to simulate desert? What can I do? And for me, I believe at least a big part of the answer is starting my day at night, turning off Netflix a little earlier, and letting my thoughts focus on the Lord, which will inform how I sleep, which will inform how I wake up in the morning, which will inform those precious moments of quiet in the morning. Now that's for me. I don't know what it is for you. I'll close with some words to a song that I really like. Cody Carnes does a song called Nothing Else. Have you guys heard that song before? Yeah, I listened to it just a few dozen times this week. This song kind of nails me. I'll show you why. I'm caught up in your presence. I just want to sit here at your feet. I'm caught up in this holy moment. I never want to leave. Oh, I'm not here for blessings. Ed, yes, you are. But sing the words, because that's the goal. I'm not here for blessings. Jesus, you don't owe me anything. Oh, Ed, but you are entitled. Be honest with yourself. You could be pretty entitled sometimes. More than anything that you can do, I just want you. I'm sorry when I've just gone through the motions. By the way, back to Isaiah. When he's in the throne room and he sees the glory and holiness of God, what happens? He sees himself for who he really is. I'm ruined. I'm a man of unclean lips. What is he saying? I'm a sinner, dude. I'm so far removed from the holy. And that's why I love this song. Because as I press in to these words, immediately I go, yes, I fall so short. And because I do, now guess what? I get to say, thank you, God, for your mercy. I'm here because you are merciful. I'm sorry when I've just gone through the motions. I'm sorry when I just sang another song. Take me back to where we started. I open up my heart to you. Hey, so fun to be with you guys. So fun. Thank you for the honor and the privilege.